about you, but who else misses President Trump? I do.
Here's who doesn't miss President Trump: Arizona Republicans who want to win elections. The Trump era has been a disaster for them at the ballot box. Republicans have lost 7 major statewide races since 2018. Kari Lake was one of the losers. Will she break that streak in her run for the U.S. Senate? Welcome back to Square Off. Kari Lake formally entered the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate last week. We're focusing on questions about her campaign and the state of the race for the other candidates in the field and a potential candidate. Joining us are Stacey Pearson, a Democratic consultant and co-founder of Lumen Strategies, and Matt Benson, a Republican with Veritas Consulting and former communications director for Governor Jan Brewer. Welcome to Square Off. Before we start, any disclosures about any candidates, folks you might be working with who we're going to talk about
No, sir.
today?
No, sir.
All right, good to know. Let's start with the Trump endorsement. Lake has tied herself to the likely Republican presidential nominee who could be in court during next year's campaign or convicted or acquitted. We don't know. He's promised, quote, retribution against his enemies if he wins. Lake would be his ally in the Senate if he and she both won. What's at stake there? Why should that matter to Arizona voters?
Everything's on the line here. We're talking about all of the issues that matter most to Arizonans. If it's public safety, if it's education, if it's support for Israel, good defense budget. I mean, really, it's all on the line. We're talking about control of the White House and control of the U.S. Senate. And those two together are immeasurably important.
And Matt, as a Republican, how much does it concern you about the Trump tie-up? He has not been good news for Republican candidates.
Yeah, to put it lightly.
Yeah.
So it's potentially a big problem. Not potentially, it is a big problem for whoever's going to be the Republican nominee. And if that's Kari Lake, it's an issue for her. Arguably, the only guy who's less popular than Donald Trump is Joe Biden. So, you know, I think the Republican or Democrat nominee are both going to have the baggage that goes along with that.
What did we hear from Kari Lake at a rally or since that tells you she learned something from losing in 2022?
Look,
I should add, she still has not conceded, but
it reminds me a bit of the first 3 years of Trump's presidency, where we heard repeatedly, oh, you know, he'd have one speech where he'd stay on message, and they'd say, oh, he's become president, he got it, he's being the adult in the room, and then the next speech would be right off the rails again. So I don't put a lot of stock in this first speech. Let's see a few weeks, a few months from now if she continues to focus on bigger issues, homelessness, fentanyl, the border, and not purely fighting old fights about the elections in 20 and 22.
She didn't have much to say about elections and kind of had a good word to say about mail-in voting. Just, I don't care how you vote, just send it in. Did you see or hear any pivot from Kari Lake from what we saw last year?
This is just the numbers, right? It was so reliable for so many cycles that Democrats got their ballots in late, and it's not the case anymore. The Republicans had held on to their ballots, and in some cases just never stuck them in the mailbox. And so it's just a numbers game, and she's going to have to get those mail-in ballots. 85%, 90% of Arizona voters use them.
I think her biggest problem is the sequel's never quite as good. It's impossible to replicate that magic, that excitement. And how does she garner all that again for another statewide race? I think the hill is very steep.
Steep hill. What about fundraising? We haven't really talked much about that. There's a Save Arizona Fund, which is a dark money fund that's been getting contributions for a year now and presumably will be used in that election. How do you think she'll do as a fundraiser?
Well, unfortunately, it needs to be a strong business component to any successful Senate race. So you have to have money coming in from the big donors. And I can't imagine anyone's going to get behind that crazy town tinfoil hat cuckoo campaign.
And the National Republican Senatorial Committee, Montana Senator Steve Daines, basically told her to knock it off, knock off the grievances, look ahead. Can she do that?
Look, I think she can try. The problem is there's 2+ years of record that's going to come back at her in TV ads and whatnot from everything she said during the last cycle, including telling McCain Republicans like myself to get the hell out. So that's going to be, look, you can't just snap your fingers and disappear it.
But she will be, it seems she'll be a pretty good small donor. Get a lot of big small donors in the way Joe Arpaio did years ago. She's got now a base all over the country, which should help out. Let's move to the Democratic side. For Democratic side, I want to stay Republican Mark Lamb, because she will have to face Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb in the August primary. He told me he's staying in all the way to August. He has not raised much money. Will he be in the race in August still? No. No.
No.
Okay. Well, that was easy.
Yeah.
We'll see how that plays out over the next few months. On the Democratic side, Congressman Ruben Gallego of Phoenix is the prohibitive nominee. Here's what he said about Lake's entry into the race. Let's listen.
She is more here to divide us, whether it's pushing away McCain Republicans or trying to, be as extreme as possible. I just don't believe that Arizonans are going to buy this new Kari Lake, because it's just not who she is.
Does Ruben Gallego want a one-on-one matchup with Kari Lake, or would he prefer a three-way race if Kyrsten Sinema gets in?
Oh, I think the odds are better for Ruben if it's a one-on-one race. Again, Kari Lake is bonkers, and so it does give him a much wider lane to define himself, but he still has an extraordinary amount of work to do to raise his name ID. He's in an urban Phoenix district. It's a very safe Democratic district. He's going to have to introduce himself to Winslow and to Ajo and to all sorts of communities throughout Arizona that define these narrow races.
So it sounds like Sinema's a spoiler.
I think that's an open question. I mean, it's an open question, and I've seen polling that shows both ways, whether she hurts the Republican nominee or the Democrat nominee more. And I think that largely is going to depend on how she positions herself in a campaign, how she spends her money, and I'm assuming she would have plenty of money to spend. But I think it's an open question.
Is it an open question or is it a settled question that she can't win?
I think she can win.
You think she can win?
I think there's a path. Because look, if it's a
you agree?
Absolutely.
If it's a three-way race, you only have to get to 34. I mean, you can do it.
And look, she has a record to stand on in the United States Senate. I mean, when Lindsey Graham and President Biden both agree that she gets things done, I mean, there are countless policies that she's passed that directly improve the lives of Arizonans, be it infrastructure. We're talking about water, Grand Canyon National Monument expansion. She's done things that in some cases have taken other senators decades to not do.
Yeah, we'll be watching, and here's a reality check. Early ballots will be in our mailbox a year from this weekend. So get ready, folks.